We will unpack the series and why it went so badly, as we mentioned at the top of the episode, but one thing I wanted to get into is the fact that a lot of folks online have been saying that we should get rid of Allen because he only had 4 rebounds in 35 minutes of play in Game 5. So do you think we should move on from the man in the middle and trade him this offseason?
Well, I think that the final 3 games of this series were disappointing across the board for everybody on the team. Should we trade everyone?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's my response to those people. Because looking at his stats, I don't see anything dissimilar to what I would find if I looked at Mitchell's stats or Garland's stats or Mobley's stats or anybody's stats. I mean, I know that on the one hand, we've got a few stats we can point to today that show that the core 4 played well. But they didn't. They still played 10 points under what they averaged. They still didn't play the defense that they played throughout the regular season. So they underperformed. That's just what happened. And I think that looking at Allen's stats, he did have 14 boards in the first game and 10 boards in the second game. Come on. I mean, what did people want? He fell off a cliff in games 3, 4, and 5, but the whole team did. And the Knicks did a great job of basically turning our team into a team without an identity. And we talked about that in our previous episode, that they stopped trusting each other, right? And Jackson Flickinger talked about it, that they were not allowing people to go one-on-one defensively because they were constantly coming off of their assignments to help each other out. And that caused a lot of openings for people to get rebounds. I mean, in that final game, Mitchell Robinson had plus 10 offensive boards. I mean, that's ridiculous. And that doesn't come from Jarrett Allen playing poorly. That comes from the entire team playing poorly. Just looking at what Allen had to say about his own play, the lights were brighter than he expected, even for him. And that it's his job as a starring role on the Cavs, it's his job to control the boards, and he couldn't do it. He said, I shoulder quite a bit of the blame. That's my job to get rebounds. That's my job to box people out. Something that I heard the announcers say before the end of the game, because they were trying to give the crowd, the hometown crowd, something to feel good about, is that they've all been where the Cavs were in that moment. Every single former player that night talking about the Cavs said, this hurts. I know because it happened to me. And what matters is the hunger that you feel, the drive that you feel. You're going to take a few days off and you're going to be right back in working at your game instead of whatever you would have done if it had gone 6 or 7 games and you felt like you actually competed more. Now they've got a big chip on their shoulder. And I would say that if they can't meet that next season, then we can start talking about trading people away.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, during the regular season, this was a really good team, and they definitely fell off a cliff in this series. And we'll talk more into the podcast about who should maybe take more blame for that. And the players are going to take blame because they're the ones that are on the floor. And Allen does deserve criticism because, as I mentioned, 4 rebounds that's something that you or I could get in a preseason basketball game with maybe G League talent. So it's not good. And Allen is a guy who is making a decent amount of money. He's on a $100 million contract, and so a lot of folks are going to say, oh, he's taking up a lot of cash and roster movement, yada, 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 yada. But really, with how much money these leagues make every year and how the cap is probably going to increase and whatnot, and the flexibility with the new CBA, he's actually a bargain right now. And I expect that he'll just improve, even if he stays where he's at statistically, what he was at the regular season. If he can translate that into the postseason, then he's in really good shape. So I think that he is getting the brunt of it because of how much better the Knicks did on the boards. But again, as you mentioned, that was the number one thing, the gold star, highlighted in yellow, triple underlined, on the scouting report, which is the Knicks are going to try to out-rebound you. And that does take a team effort to get them off the boards. It's not just Allen. Allen will take the brunt, and he'll take the blame, and seems to be a gracious enough person to, take that on. But I don't think you trade him just because of the fact that the whole team let down and just looked like garbage in that game when it came to rebounding. So, yeah, I agree. You keep him and you try to utilize his leadership and his actual innate abilities moving forward, as opposed to dwelling on a few bad performances.
Thank you for listening to the Cavaliers Basketball Club podcast. Let's go Cavs!